In today's show, there are 7 trailblazers in the league's health and safety protocols. What do they do from here? Welcome to Lockdown Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazer reporter, Mike Richmond. You're listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and now also on YouTube. If you're listening to my voice right now, please go subscribe to the YouTube channel. Either if you're watching on YouTube, just hit the button, or if you're listening to podcast feed, podcast listener, go to YouTube, support the show on both streams. I'd truly appreciate it. We're trying to get to 2,000 subscribers by 2022. And we're not going to make it without your help. So if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, please go ahead and do that. In today's show, the health and safety protocols that have decimated rosters around the league has arrived here in Portland. The Omicron variant of COVID-19 has made it to the Portland Trailblazers. It was inevitable. It was just the way the NBA has decided to push forward with this. It was going to happen to the Trailblazers, and now it has. 7 players are in the health and safety protocols. They will likely miss at least 10 days. That's at least 4 games without a big old chunk of the Blazers roster, including most of this team's front court. Let's talk in this show about who's in it, who's left, what they do from here, who else do they need to sign, what else do they need to do, and what's it going to look like. They're supposed to play a basketball game on Monday evening. This is Monday, December 27th show. I'm recording it on the evening of Sunday, December 26th. Things can change since I was about to hit record and did hit record. 2 other players have been in the health and safety protocols. So I'm going to try to give you everything I know as of right now. It's just before 8 p.m. on the West Coast. I am on the East Coast where it is almost 11 p.m. But here's what we know right now as of 11 p.m. Sunday evening in beautiful Chapel Hill, North Carolina, where I'm recording this from. Shout out to my childhood bedroom. So let's go through the timeline, how they got here. Let's look at what's next and what this situation put the Blazers in ahead of a game against the Mavericks, who are also missing 7 players who are currently in the health and safety protocols. It's a lot to unpack. Here's the timeline. The Blazers last played a game on December 21st against New Orleans Pelicans. The day after that, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who gave the Blazers 18 points in that fourth quarter and really just, ended Portland's chances in that game, tested positive, went to the health and safety protocols. It was inevitable. It was coming. They just played against someone who, less than 24 hours later, tested positive for COVID-19. You knew it was going to happen. The Blazers did not play Thursday. Their game was canceled or postponed against the Brooklyn Nets, supposed to play a home game against the Brooklyn Nets, but the league canceled that postponed that because the Nets did not have enough players to play. So the Blazers have had a full week off now. They weren't, they went home for Christmas. Guys go home for Christmas Eve. They went home for Christmas Day. They actually didn't reconvene until they had a late practice on Sunday, December 26th. They got a full Christmas weekend. You don't get a lot of these extended times off once the NBA season starts. Nice to get guys away. But before all that happened, you knew it was kind of coming. On December 24th, on Christmas Eve, after that exposure in the New Orleans Pelicans game, a couple days later, that Dennis Smith Jr. and Trendon Watford tested positive and entered the health and safety protocols. That was on Christmas Eve. That was first reported by Shams Charania of The Athletic. And in that report, Shams Charania indicated that since there were 2 positives on for the Blazers, kind of everyone else on the roster called back in, you got to test. The way it works is unvaccinated guys don't have to test as regularly as vaccinated players do. It's just, and the Blazers, to the best of my knowledge, are 100% vaccinated, 100% boosted. So have taken the, advised medical precautions to avoid, the more serious dangers related to COVID-19. But just where we're at sort of health-wise is you are still likely to come down with maybe a less severe, sounds like a less severe case of it if you're vaccinated with what the Omicron variant is. But you still, if players are exposed, you got to call everybody back in and get tested. That means on Christmas Day, Robert Covington, Ben McLemore, and Keljin Blevins entered the health and safety protocols. Now they're going to be out for at least 10 days. You got to be asymptomatic or symptom free and then pass 2 negative tests, right? So it's typically a 10-day period. Most NBA players, unless there's a false negative situation, which has happened a couple times here, have had to go through the full 10 days. Most players that have entered health and safety protocols have not gotten out early. So now you're looking at 5 players in for at least 10 days. And then on December 26th, in the evening of December 26th, the Blazers had 2 more players with Jusuf Nurkic and Cody Zeller enter the health and safety protocols. Okay, so now the Blazers are down to 7 players, and the injury report for the Blazers is book length. It's long, and it includes Damian Lillard, who's questionable for Monday's game, out for personal reasons. Now, if Dame were to miss the game for whatever those personal reasons might be, the Blazers are going to be mighty shorthanded. CJ McCollum, who this show is supposed to be about CJ, so we'll just do this here quickly, and we're not going to talk about it as much because of all the other news. But CJ McCollum last week was his right lung, which had collapsed. He had pneumothorax of the right lung, was a collapsed right lung. He's been out for about 2 weeks. Last week he was cleared for the team announced that his right lung was fully healed. He's cleared for non-contact drills, and he was going to do increased conditioning and increased shooting as he kind of works himself up. And then this week he was supposed to be they were going to reevaluate and maybe he was going to come back. And I was kind of eyeing Thursday's game against the Utah Jazz, a home game where CJ's likely to come back. The game after that they play back-to-back LA Atlanta, but and Atlanta games at home. And so, it seems like to me, it would be the Thursday or maybe the return trip and potentially the LA game. But like later this week, seems like CJ McCollum would come back. Seems like Cody Zeller would come back. He was supposedly going to be reevaluated this week. And I thought maybe the end of this week, you'd also get Cody Zeller. But you don't have CJ, and you potentially don't have Dame. And you're left with a lot of question marks. I would assume that tomorrow's starting lineup, or this evening's starting lineup against Dallas Mavericks, is Monday's show, is Avery Simons, Norman Powell, Nazir Little, Tony Snell, and Larry Nance Jr. You do not have another person taller than 6'8" on the roster outside of Larry Nance. They're going to need to sign someone else. The thing is, the Blazers already have signed 3 players out of the G League. The league has mandated when players enter health and safety protocols, you have to sign replacement players. We kind of joked about it a little bit last week, and I pitched Rudy Fernandez. Rudy Fernandez is not on the team. They've added some other players. Let's come back in the second segment. Let's talk about who they added, what this team is going to look like playing against a Dallas Mavericks team that is also going through something similar as the league presses on in unprecedented and bizarre times. Unprecedented was, I thought, a word we were going to leave behind last year, but it has creeped back up as we head towards 2022. So before we talk about the precedents, let's talk about Truebill. It is the new app that helps you identify and stop paying for subscriptions, either the ones you don't need or the ones you don't want or the ones you just straight up forgot about. On average, people save up to $720 a year when they use Truebill, and it's because companies make subscriptions hard to cancel. They do it intentionally. So Truebill is here to make it incredibly simple and easy for you. Just link your accounts, and Truebill will cancel your unwanted subscriptions in one tap. And if it's more than one tap, a Truebill concierge is there so they can cancel those unwanted subscriptions and you don't have to. I've used Truebill, super easy. In about 10 minutes, I went to the website, truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. I downloaded the app on my phone, and in 10 minutes, I had downloaded the app, linked all of my digital subscription, was staring at them on my phone. Super simple, super easy, super streamlined. It could work for you. So don't fall for those subscription scams. Start canceling today at truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. Go right now, truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. That's truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. It could save you thousands a year. All right. So the Blazers, with 7 players in the health and safety protocols, find themselves equally handed against the Dallas Mavericks, who also have 7 players in the health and safety protocols. Let me read you off the Dallas list because it is also lengthy. Reggie Bullock, Trey Burke, Willie Cauley-Stein, Luka Doncic, Tim Hardaway Jr., Maxi Kleber, and Ja'Cory McLaughlin also out. That's 7 Mavericks if you are scoring at home. The Mavs have been dealing with this. They signed Marquise Chris and national champion from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, Theo Pinson, but worked out pretty well for them when you get a Tar Heel. But this is kind of where the league is right now. Is they are just guys are getting to G League, guys are getting to live out their dream, guys who are on the street, free agents on the street, getting to come back in the league, like, Marquise Chris and Theo Pinson. And the Blazers are not alone in signing replacement players. They're going to have to sign another tall person. We'll talk about that more in a moment. No Nurk, no Zeller, only Larry Nance. The tallest person on their bench is the newly signed Cameron McGriff, who is playing for the Greensboro Swarm in the G League, averaged 10.4 points and 4.9 boards for the Swarm. He is a 24-year-old who went undrafted out of Oklahoma State. He's 6'7" forward, kind of a little bit of length added, but because the Blazers lost McLemore and they lost Blevins and they lost Dennis Smith Jr., they went ahead and added some depth at guard. They're missing, might be missing Dame and are missing CJ. Like, they need some depth at guard. And so they added two other guards. Brandon Williams, who's playing for the Westchester Knicks and averaging 17.7 points and 4.5 assists per game. He's a 6'2", 22-year-old undrafted out of Arizona. And Jaron Cumberland, who was playing for the Delaware Bluecoats in the G League, averaging 9.4 points, 3.7 boards, and 2.4 assists, a 6'5" guard who's 24 years old out of Cincinnati. I can't pretend like I've seen these folks. I was not at the G League showcase in Las Vegas. And I'm not a big college basketball guy. Like, what I know is they signed two guards and a forward. That's what I can tell you. What I will say is that I'm going to imagine that Cameron McGriff plays a great deal of minutes. The Blazers are going to need Mr. McGriff. This is not a call up for insurance purposes. This is a call up because the Blazers straight up just need bodies. Like I said, Damian Lillard is listed as questionable for Monday's game against the Dallas Mavericks with out for personal reasons is what the Blazers are calling it. Whatever that might be, whether Dame's, questionable is like in the technical sense means it's like 50% chance likelihood that you'll play, like a coin flip. But if we assume that Damian Lillard is not available, we're talking Anthony Simons, Norman Powell, Nazir Little, Tony Snell, Larry Nance Jr., I would assume is my presumptive starting lineup. And off the bench, if Dame is not available, the only other sort of Blazers regular, for lack of a better term, will be CJ Ellaby, because CJ McCollum has already been ruled out for Monday's game as he still works his way back. Be CJ Ellaby, and then you're looking at the replacement guys at the G Leaguers. You're looking at Brandon Williams and Jaron Cumberland, and you're definitely looking at Cameron McGriff. He's 6'7". They're going to need him. Like, they're just straight up going to need him. I did like their, Snell and Nas can play four a little bit. I think you're going to see the Blazers go super duper small with like Nazir Little and Tony Snell playing a little bit of five somewhere in there. But the Blazers they just need more size. So like, this is, I'm not going to pretend like I've spent this Christmas weekend studying G League tape, but like, you better hope Cameron McGriff can play, because they're gonna need what he brings. Even before like Nurk and Zeller going into the protocols is really bad news, because one, you just don't want people to get sick. No one having 7 players in the Blazers and 7 players in the Mavericks is bad for the league. It's bad news. It's bad. It's kind of just bad news that we're in a place where we're both testing to find out and pretending to be worried about this to some extent. I don't know. I'm not saying that what you are. I'm saying the league is. You, dear listener, can like pick your own adventure with this stuff. But like, the league's like pretending to be concerned to some extent, and also just like introducing a whole bunch of players into the ecosystem and saying they can play as long as they don't enter the same protocols the people they're replacing are in. It's quite strange optics from the league. If nothing else, it's a very strange place for them to be in, with 2 teams playing with 7 people ruled out with like a pretty contagious virus. It's quite something. But like before like the need for a center, right? Before, because Zeller wasn't going to play, but you could between Nurk and Nance, you can steal enough minutes to figure out how to play those center minutes. But with only Nance, like, you don't have a traditional center on the roster. Nance is a totally capable NBA center, but what's a reasonable number of minutes for him to play? Like, even if he plays 40, you still have 8 minutes where Tony Snell or Nazir Little or this Cameron McGriff fellow is your center, and that will be a challenge. The Blazers, like, since they've gone to this new starting lineup with Dame and Norm and Nas and Nance and Nurk, like, they're still playing Robert Covington 30 minutes off the bench. That's 30 minutes of basically power forward minutes of Cov basically exclusively plays at the 4, regardless of who's playing 5 next to him. That's 30 minutes you're going to have to replace. They were shorting up the bench with Ben McLemore, but he was playing 15 minutes a night. If CJ Ellaby can step into those minutes, obviously he's a pretty big step down from McLemore, but at least he's somewhat familiar with the plan. And then they were playing like a one first half cameo of Trendon Watford playing small ball center. That was even with Nurk and with Nance healthy. Like they were still kind of needing to steal 4 minutes of playing a different shape and playing a different size at a different dude at center, just because you need rest. Like if you start both of your centers at 4 and 5, at some point, both of them are going to have to sit in the first half. If you're going to kind of stretch it, you can fake the funk a little bit late because you can stretch guys, but that's, it's hard to ask Nurk to play 37 minutes and get the most out of them. Also him and Nance have had some foul trouble. So you kind of got to go to the Trendon Watford thing as well. So like the Blazers need another big. It's just, it's undeniable that they're going to need one. I think you would be better off signing kind of a veteran big here. But I do think like the sort of MO of the front office is to sign young guys, who've popped in the G League, who they scouted in the G League and they think can help, because maybe you find something that can help you moving forward as opposed to like a more veteran type like Marquise Chris. But the Blazers are going to need another big. I think that part is undeniable. Let's talk about a little about what the next 10 days might look like. Because I think Monday is going to look like this, and depending on Dame's availability, really not a lot of centers, no point guards. Against a team that's equally undermanned. But like let's take a look at what the next little bit might be like for the Blazers in the third segment to close out the show. But before we do that, I want to tell y'all about Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar that there is. It's pretty simple. They're just making delicious protein bars. I've been telling you about Built Bars in the space for a long time. I've also been enjoying them at my home for a long time. They're good. Like I could tell you a lot of things, but they're good. They're the best tasting protein bar I've ever had. They're covered in 100% chocolate. My personal favorites are cookies and cream and peanut butter brownie, but they got a bunch of different flavors and some rotating limited time flavors. So you will always be able to find something that meets your palate. And regardless, they just pack a punch: 17 to 18 grams of protein, 130 to 180 calories, 4 to 5 grams of sugar, and no more than 5 grams of net carbs. All tasty, all healthy. Go get yourself some. Go to built.com and use that promo code LOCKED15. You get 15% off your next order. That's LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. Still a pass first point guard. Still Mike Richmond. Still listening to Locked On Blazers. So Monday's game is going to look a little bit different. If Dame plays, the Blazers have enough talent to beat a shorthanded Mavs team. If they don't, it's going to be quite an interesting Kristaps Porzingis Norman Powell showdown. It'll be something. I've said this before, and I don't want to say this to be flippant about anyone's health, because this stuff is serious. Like we are moving to a point sort of, I think, culturally and particularly in this country, in the United States. So for my international listeners, might not apply to you, but like we are going to treat COVID exposure differently over the next 5-6 months. The way we do this in the summer is going to be drastically different. And this is part of kind of the stages to get there. It's inevitable that the sort of, our response to it is going to change. The way we worry and the way we care about this is going to change. Absolutely. But right now, this is kind of the space we're in. And I don't want to be flippant about people's health, because quite frankly, I just don't know enough about this. I'm not a public health professional to sort of say like, oh, everyone's going to be fine. Who cares? Because I hope that is the case. I think generally speaking, that has been the case for most NBA guys. This wave of COVID, it certainly has not been in the past. There's been, NBA players, including Nazir Little, got very sick, and it's like I said, don't want to be flippant about anyone's health, but like we assume that everyone comes back and is available to play. We're talking 10 days from today. And for most of those guys, at a very minimum, that's going to be 4 games. It's going to be Dallas on Tuesday evening, assuming that game happens, Monday evening, assuming that game happens. It's going to be Utah on Thursday of this week. They play the Jazz. The Jazz are going to be without Donovan Mitchell for that, who's dealing with just a basketball related injury, not COVID stuff. And the Jazz, for the most part, have not had one of the teams that just hasn't had a lot of health and safety issues. So for, the Jazz are mostly whole, but missing one of their best players. tough game. Mavericks kind of a toss up. All these games are really weird with these raggedy lineups. The Mavs are mediocre. The Blazers have been straight up bad. Hard to call it, right? But Utah is a really good basketball team, even without Donovan Mitchell. They're certainly worse, but they're a really good basketball team. Then they play at the Lakers, who are a mess. Not a particularly good basketball team, but they do have LeBron James, who's pretty good. And then they come back and they play the Hawks. Most of these gentlemen, most of the Blazers who have been in health and safety protocols are very likely to miss all 4 of those games. That's at a minimum. You're talking 4 games where even on like a generous read on the who's going to be available is something like Dame, Norm, Nas, Tony Snell, Larry Nance, and Anthony Simons. That's 6. Then you can go 7 with CJ Ellaby, and your 8th is probably this Cameron McGriff or whatever center the Blazers sign. That's something. Also, I said the Jazz game was, apologies here. I'm looking at the schedule real quick. Jazz game's Wednesday, and then they play Friday, Saturday. I got my days backed up. But so if we're talking 10 days from Christmas Eve for Dennis Smith Jr. and Trendon Watford, the first 2 Blazers to enter the health and safety protocols, then we're talking through the Hawks game. There's a potential that most of the Blazers are back for the January 5th game against the Miami Heat. And the gentleman who entered it today, that's Cody Zeller and Jusuf Nurkic, they're very likely to miss that Heat game as far as my understanding of it, and they would return for a home game January 7th against the Cleveland Cavaliers. So conceivably, guys are missing 4 to 5 games. The Blazers are not in a good spot. Like, they really, really, really need wins. We kind of talked about this on a previous version of the show, is that this was kind of inevitable, is that this was going to happen and they were going to have to deal with it in some way, somehow. It's not like the Blazers are doing this in like a unique way that other teams are. Signing G League guys and pushing forward with games has happened across the league and across a bunch of different teams. It is what it, like, again, I don't want to be flipping about people's health, but it kind of is what it is. Like, this is the league's response. They are going to keep playing basketball games. And so the Blazers, by being members of this league, are going to have to keep playing basketball games. But they are just, this is bad news for them. The door is open in the West for one of these bottom teams in the league to make a move. Certainly the Blazers are, I don't know, like poised to do that because they've really struggled. And, even when they've looked like they've had an opportunity, they lose that game last week to the Pelicans. But like, you just look at the teams ahead of them. The Clippers are going to be without Paul George for a month. The Nuggets still haven't been healthy. The Lakers are just not very good. And the Mavericks, again, kind of mediocre and missing a whole bunch of their parts. The T-Wolves have been up and down. The Spurs are a good defensive team without a lot of offense, but some interesting young parts, and the Blazers are sitting here today. They're 2.5 games out of 6th, but they're also missing 7 players and basically all of their centers. There wasn't like this was going to be a good time or a good, there wasn't like a good time to have a COVID outbreak, but I think the door was open for the Blazers to kind of seize something, like they haven't been very good. They've looked mostly like a bad team this season, but even with like mostly looking like a bad team, they're 13-19. They just blew a road game against a legitimately bad team in the Pelicans. I know that they had won 4 in a row at one point, including that win over the Blazers, but I'll call it what it is. You can tell Jake Madison, host of Locked On Pelicans, like a legitimately bad team. And the Pelicans, the door was open for the Blazers. And I was, I don't know if I was loading up the optimism cannon, but I was looking and say, Cody Zeller's getting back this week. He helps because they need another body. CJ McCollum's going to get back this week. He helps because he's a good NBA basketball player. They haven't been very good. I don't really have faith in their defense getting good, but like as bad as they've been, the door is cracked and they can burst through that no problem. They don't even have to rip off a bunch of games. They need to win something like 6 out of 10. Like they need to go 6-4 over their next 10 games, and they would be right there, with a kind of a little mini home heavy stretch before they go out on the road for a while and things probably get a little bit dicey, but back for a majority of home games for 2 weeks. Like I was looking at this quite frankly, preparing for this episode this weekend and saying like, I don't want to like truly be optimistic because it's not how I feel in my heart. I've watched this game too closely to like really feel like, oh, they're about to rip off some games. But like I see the Paul George news. I watch the Lakers play on Christmas. I'm familiar with the musical stylings of the San Antonio Spurs and the Dallas Mavericks. Like these teams aren't like wholly better than the Blazers. Like they're also just mediocre. Like it's right there for them to be right back avoiding the play-in. And then this stretch of games puts them in a situation where they're going to be without a lot of their depth. Rocco's been really good since he's been to the bench. Ben McLemore like straight up won them a game with hitting 8 threes off the bench against the Grizzlies. Like it's, they're that was before the Grizzlies game. Sorry. But like, it's they need these depth parts. Like they'd shortened the bench and kind of said, it's going to be Rocco and BMAC and Ant, and that's who's going to play. And this is kind of the group we trust. And when CJ gets back, we'll go 9 deep and we'll go from there. And now that's kind of all out the window. And a team that I don't know if they needed continuity. They probably need change much more desperately than they need continuity. But and it's like I said, there's no good timing for this. But the Blazers were sort of poised to be able to wipe away the grossness of their first 32 games here and say, hey, if we're just kind of fine over our next, over our next 10, and we look up here at the midway point and we're 3 games under 500, we'll be right there in striking distance. Like, I really believe that. Like that doesn't sound particularly good, but if the Blazers are 3 games under 500 at the midway point of the season, they will be fine because the bottom half of the West is not good. Will they be fine? Like, I'm talking relative to expectations. I thought this team was going to finish 6th in the West. I think if they were 3 games under 500 at the midway point, they could be right there, right? They could be back in this sort of a chance to avoid the play and finish 6th in the West. And the playoffs will likely be their own sobering opportunity. But like now they've got 10 days, 4 or 5 games where I don't think you could confidently call any of these a win. And, Atlanta has also had a bunch of guys in health and safety protocols. So that the end of this stretch is unknowable, and the Heat have had health problems with Bam Adebayo and Kyle Lowry and out of the lineup, and same with Jimmy Butler. Like, but they're a pain. Like I don't think you can look at any of these 5 games and say, oh, that's a win. That's for sure a win. And if the Blazers go 1-4, like if we look up and they're 14-23, I don't think I can fake it for optimism on a Sunday show sometime in the future. I think we got to call it. They've kind of come to the point in the season where it was put up or shut up, and like shut up might mean like put up or shut down. Like it might mean just like call it and say, hey, this isn't going to happen with this group. We need to we kind of got to tear it back or drastically overhaul as much as we can with what we have. And I thought this next 10-12 games was going to be a chance for them to kind of decide what direction they wanted to go heading into the trade deadline in February. And now they're going to be missing 5 rotation guys and 7 players. It's Rocco and McLemore and Nurk were all going to play. Zeller was a maybe. Watford is a maybe. And Dennis Smith Jr. is like a specific matchup he plays. Keljin Blevins wasn't going to play, but like Rocco and McLemore and Nurk, particularly Rocco and Nurk, are vitally important to what this team wants to do and who they sort of what they can be. Like their ceiling is in many ways defined by how well those guys play each and every night. And now you play 4 or 5 games without them. This was supposed to be about CJ McCollum's return. I'll hold this up for the YouTube world. I had it here in the notebook. I had notes on CJ McCollum, and I had to scrap that and start writing, like figuring out the depth chart, right? Like, this stinks. I think is this stinks. It stinks because it feels like you're watching an intentionally watered down version of the league. It stinks because players you root for are homesick, and even if some of them might not have symptoms and might not be that like in any like sort of grave medical danger, but sick with this is the situation you want anybody to be in. Stinks. It's bad. It feels bad for the league. It feels bad to talk about. We're not in a good spot. And then there's the basketball stuff, and the basketball stuff puts the Blazers in it puts their season, it puts an already season that was skittering in the wrong direction. It puts it at a chance to just go completely sideways and for them to lose control of the rope, just let go of the rope completely because, Dame and Norman Nance is not Dame and Norman Nance or whatever as your three best players is not a playoff team in the West. It's a maybe pretty entertaining team, and I'm happy for guys to get opportunities. I'm really happy for Brandon Williams and Jaron Cumberland, Cameron McGriff to introduce themselves to me on the court, and me to figure out what they are and get a chance to prove they belong in the league. But this isn't the circumstances any of us want. So hopefully no more bummers this week. Blazers play the Mavs. We will recap that one. Obviously, I guess a lot of these games are probably like reasonably in jeopardy, but depending on health and safety stuff. So if they're not, we'll talk about something else. We didn't, because it was a holiday week last week. We didn't get Quick on the show. That's my bad. I'll do my best to do that this week. So we'll get Jason Quick on there. We'll talk about what's going on with the Blazers. We'll do a mailbag. We'll have a lot of fun. Locked On Blazers still rolls on. I'm not loading up the optimism cannon, but I'm not going to not do shows. I'm going to bring it to you and try to bring you some energy, try to help us learn more about whatever this version of the Blazers looks like. So tell your friends about this podcast. Tell them they can get it wherever they already get podcasts and on YouTube. Go subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't. I'd truly appreciate it. Come back for more. 5 days a week, free wherever you get podcasts, the only Daily Trailblazers podcast. Appreciate you listening. Talk to you soon.